Okay. All right. Good evening, folks. Welcome to another episode of Saturday Night Fever. And we're here live with Sangeeta Talwar. And I just wanted to say again from the bottom of my heart, Sangeeta, thank you so much. I know you're very busy. You've got a ton of stuff going on. Unlike me, retired guy, I got nothing to do. I'm chilled out. So really, really appreciate it for you coming in. As you can see, we've already got some people on in the audience, and Vivan currently actually is a startup. He's a founder. He's here on every session of ours, and I'm sure he's on a lot of other sessions as well. So, really honored to have you on the show. Thank you for making the time.
Thank you for having me here, Bharat.
Anytime. This is great. So, by the way, audience, I just wanted to give you a quick hi because I met Sangeeta Talwar thanks to the fact that both of us are learning to be coaches. So, we met as part of our coaching modules as we were going through the training. And it was fascinating just listening to her perspectives and, interacting with her. She's, as you will see, she's quite a vibrant, high energy person. And obviously passionate about whatever she does. So I'm really excited about this. And Sangeeta, by the way, I want to tell you that you're the first lady on our show. So
Oh, great.
so much. It makes a huge, huge difference. And I'm sure we'll get to a lot of things out there. So before we get started, why don't I have you, you've had a phenomenal career. I mean, you've been at Nestle for a very long time. You were an EVP over there, and then you moved to Mattel, where you were the CEO, and now you've got your own brand shop of your own company. So it would be great to hear straight from you in terms of what this journey was like. Take your time. We're here for
Oh,
you.
okay. So this journey was very exciting from day one. And I'll just start with the end of the Nestle story. So I worked with them for 20 years. I still remember the day when I was dressed in my crisply presented Calcutta cotton sari outside the door of Nestle, my first day of entry into the company, and I didn't know what lay ahead. At the end of those 20 years when they were giving me a farewell, so many people said, it's a long thing. Didn't you get bored? And I told them, I said, I didn't get bored for even one single day. Isn't that amazing? Because there's always so much to do. So it was a fantastic journey and excellent career. And I'm very grateful to everybody who was a part of that journey to make it happen for me. And I started off as a management trainee straight out of IIM Calcutta. I
Okay.
wanted a Delhi job, so I had three options in Delhi, and Nestle was the obvious choice with a very large plethora of international brands. So, being in marketing, having chosen marketing as my major, that was a natural choice. And I got to work on the smallest product of the company first.
Okay.
And I guess I did a half decent job of that because then the next one I got to work on was a real challenger, and that was Maggie noodles.
Maggie.
Noodles were not known in India. It was an
Okay,
alien
I want you to
concept.
pause on that because I'm gonna dig a lot deeper into
Okay, so
what
I'm
we're.
not going to go there.
Yeah,
But
don't. Let's
yeah,
hold the suspense a little bit.
yeah. So I want to just mention that when I stepped out of Nestle, I'd already done a lot of multifunctional roles, which was an amazing comment on the company, and I
Right.
hold that company in very high regard. So I was in marketing. I moved into sales as the first woman regional sales manager in India. There was
Wow.
no woman before me in that role.
You and I
And
must have competed at some point because, as I mentioned to you, I was at Brookbond back then when you guys were
right,
fighting. So we were competing with Brew and Nescafe,
right, right, right.
and we used to meet you guys. At that time, you guys were actually called Food Specialties.
We
Food
were
Specialties.
called Food
FSL.
Specialities Limited. Yeah, yeah.
That's right.
M5A was our corporate office, and
Uh-huh.
then that became my regional office when the
There
headquarters
you go.
moved.
Yep. Yep.
And then I moved into HR. I was HR director for 2 years for Nestle. So everything in
Oh,
HR,
really?
yeah,
Wow.
including factories, corporate HR, everything. So it was a very large portfolio. And then I became executive vice president marketing. So I literally ran the P&L of the company because I had
Hmm.
a pricing team. Milk pricing was a very large component of the business. And anyway, so it was, and then 3 years in Switzerland was just fantastic. I just loved it. And when I came back, I started looking after a joint venture business they'd gotten into. And
Okay.
actually, there's a lesson in here. I outsourced myself because having been in that business for a year and a half, I told them you're never going to make a dime out of this business. It's just
Okay.
wrongly set up. The assets are wrong. Everything is wrong. So I helped them close that business. And in the process, I put out my CV. I said, okay, let's be brave.
Okay.
Let's see what's out there. And I got a job as the CEO for Mattel. I was based out of Mumbai, so I had to leave my family in Delhi, and that was another amazing experience. Toys are just, they keep the child alive in you. And if you
Tell me
want
about
to,
it. I
yeah, you,
I just love toys. My favorite place is a toy store.
yeah, Bharat, my room was full of toys. So it was an amazing experience. And it really, the other lesson there was I moved from a formal, large company in
Mhm.
food completely across to a fun filled business to do with children, American multinational, very different from a
Very
European
different from
multinational,
European.
very
Yeah.
different,
Yeah.
chalk and cheese.
Yeah.
And here, in Nestle, it was very formal. So if the boss passed by your desk, you stood up in reverence or whatever. And there, the junior most person, she would
I know
shout
exactly
across the hall. She said, "Sangeeta, I have an idea. Can I come in?" you
what.
know.
Yeah,
So
it's
to
totally
me,
different.
yeah. So to me, it was a great shift for me because I always told my husband, I said, if I can't deal with the youngest person in the organization, I shouldn't work. I should, hang up my boots. So
True.
that was amazing. And then I took a short period off. My daughter was finishing class 12 and, all of
Mhm.
that. There was no lady at home. She was saying, Mom, I'm handling three men, my grandfather, father, and a cook. So
Oh gosh.
anyway, so I spent about a year plus at home, and then she went to Warwick, and then I joined Tata Tea as an executive director. And Bharat, it was crazy. People
Yeah,
would
speed
come
was
to my
moving.
door. People would come to this heavy oak door. I needed my entire body weight to push it. Okay. And they would come in and say, there's never been a woman in this role. Now we come to see kaun aaya hai.
This is like you're the what shall I say? The old curiosity shop, right? I mean, let me see what it looks like to see a lady in the office.
ये antique shop में कौन आ गया? Anyway, so that was and then I stayed there till we integrated the Tetley business and we morphed the company into Tata Global Beverages. And I was regional president for South Asia, which was one third of the bottom line and the
Portfolio,
top
yeah.
line of the
It's
company.
pretty
Yeah,
big.
though it was an international company. And so I was on the innovation board and, I had a very senior role there. And I
Sure.
was one of the, by the way, the very, very few women in the Tata group. And they would
Mm.
never acknowledge that because it was just, not
Yeah.
good to acknowledge that.
Yeah, and Tata Hill
Um,
is full of the old boys club. I know.
yeah. So,
Been there.
Bharat, one of the things I have to tell you, as a senior leader, you had to be part of the business excellence process.
Yeah.
And I was mentoring two companies. And at the end of that mentoring, once a year, you went to the GCC, you went to the boardroom, and
Right.
you had to debrief Ratan Tata and the GCC, which was a bunch of 9 people. And that room had 50 men in it. I was the only spark of color
Nice.
there. It was black and white gray.
Black, white, and gray. That's right.
Yeah, yeah.
No,
So,
I completely, and that is what to me, Sangeeta, has been so fascinating as I learned about you first from Gaurav and then, looking at your LinkedIn profile and getting to know you. And I'm still getting to know you. So that itself is, it's a different story. But what really gets me is, we all say it's lonely at the top, right? But I think you probably dealt with that loneliness at two levels, both being a female and being at the top of the game.
yeah.
How was that for you?
So, it's not easy. I've traveled the world. I've traveled extensively on the job and all alone, all my life. And till recently, till a few years ago, maybe 10 years ago, I used to be the only woman in business or first class. There were no other women, so it's
Wow.
been very lonely. And
Mm.
leadership, in any case, is a lonely spot.
Yeah.
And I think my greatest support has been my family, my husband and my daughter. And of course, some excellent colleagues and excellent companies. So, I
Sure.
have to tell you, when we talk about bias, right, there's an organizational bias and then there's a people bias.
Yeah.
And good organizations try to minimize the people bias. They don't have organizational bias. So there are no policies and systems that hold you back.
Right.
But they can't help the attitudes of some of the
Sure.
senior people there,
Sure.
right? But they try to mitigate that to an extent. So I'll give you one quick story. It's quite
Sure.
interesting.
Please.
I traveled back from the factory once from Punjab to Delhi, and
Mhm.
they didn't book a ticket for me. So I was very badly harassed. It was in the deluxe train,
Train.
and I was harassed because I was sitting in the corridor. There was a bunch of young businessmen from Ludhiana who just, they wouldn't let me be, and I
Mm.
was very, very perturbed by that. And I went and told my boss that, this is not a good thing. And he
Mm.
said, I'll put out a circular that we don't know how to treat our women. I said,
Mm.
sir, please don't do that because I will give you my resignation letter. And he thought to himself, what kind of person is this? I'm trying to help her. And she's saying, I'm going to
Saying I'll
resign.
quit.
So he said, okay, so what's the problem? I said, sir, I didn't join my job to be put in the glass case and put in the corner. So I
Mm.
came here to do a job, and if you do that kind of circular, nobody will treat me as an equal. They'll cotton ball me and put me aside. So I don't want, while I know you want to help me, please don't write that letter. So, there were these kind of
So
conversations that used to
that
happen.
actually brings up a question in my mind, right? So today you see, I'm going to ask a pretty sensitive question, audience, and Sangeeta, I'm sure you can handle it. The thing is that we hear so much about gender bias. We hear so much about gender diversity, women in leadership, like it's an event, right? And we treat it like an event. You did the exact opposite. You were not looking for any subsidies or any kind of, not that other women are asking for subsidies, don't get me wrong, that's not at all what I mean to say. What I'm trying to get at is that you went the other way and you said, look, I'm going to be here on my own right, on my own 2 feet, and be worth it as an executive, as an employee. Is that something you think that women who aspire to leadership should be keeping front and center? Is that something that they need to develop as an attitude?
Uh, Certainly, because it's a tough ride for a woman. There are these hotspot moments in your life when you get married or you have a child, and those are moments that need support from the organization. So my response to
Absolutely.
you to that question will be mixed,
Okay.
because I think certainly women need to be very courageous, and they need to be empowered to make their own choices so that they feel responsible for the outcome of those choices. It's one thing to choose your own path and
Sure.
say, okay, whatever comes as a result of that is something that I can handle, and to have that confidence. And
Hmm.
it's a very different thing to say, oh, I was asked to study this, and then my father told me to this job, and you end up your whole life blaming the world,
Mhm.
whereas you shouldn't. So that builds a lot of self confidence the moment you're able to make your own choices. I made my own choice. My father was a very senior government servant. He wanted me to join the IFS. And I told him, I said, Dad, that's the old world. I want to join the business world. And so I sort of pushed him to allow me to make my own choice. And then I stood by the consequences of that decision. My mother told me, she said, you picked a very hard role for yourself. But they never stopped me, they never stopped me. And I'll tell you, Bharat, it's very difficult for the patriarchy in the family,
Yeah.
because when you have a lady from the family out there, and I used to travel at a time when, Bharat, there was one airline, there were two
Yeah.
cars, there was no food, no water to be found
Yep.
out there, no toilets. Okay, I
Yep.
used to travel the length and breadth of India. So, but my husband uh, never called and said, or never told me, don't do this, don't go there, who are you going with? Nothing.
Hmm.
He always reposed that confidence in me,
Yeah.
that I know that if I'm going somewhere, it will be a safe place. It won't be, and I've done some really horrible traveling. I mean, I could write a different book on that.
Yeah.
But it's a mixed response, because while the women need to be highly courageous and
Yeah.
self dependent and determined and resilient, right? Their family needs to be equally
Yeah.
supportive. And I tell you, I recently, some years ago, I was coaching women in the cement industry,
Hmm.
and I was amazed at these young girls going on their scooties to sell cement bags in the interior of the highway.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm.
And they were narrating their stories to me, and they told me, they said, "Ma'am, hum kisi ko nahi bata sakte." I said, "Why? What happened?" She said, "If I tell my brother or my father, they'll say, Kisne bola tha naukri karo? Leave it. Come and sit down at home.
Yeah, बिल्कुल.
Who's told you to?" So, it's very difficult for them. Like I told you, if I went and told my boss about something, he said, "I'll put out a note." He was trying to help me.
Exactly.
So it's very difficult, Bharat. There's no
And that's
straight
just my
answer.
and
Yeah,
that's just my point. See, while I may be as an individual, I pride myself on being, gender sensitive and gender respectful. But I know that I've got these micro biases already. I mean, as I'm listening to myself asking these questions, I'm already talking about you as a woman. While yes, your being a woman is part of what we want to know about. The really important question now is that we get a lot of startups and people who are in the startup industry, in the startup world, um, and they're all just setting up their companies, setting up their organizations.
right.
What would be some of the advice that you would give them in terms of how to why women, why, and what can be done in order to be able to start your company off the right way
Right.
in terms of providing an even platform for
Yeah.
anybody to compete,
Yeah.
right?
So the first thing I would say is, please be inclusive of the other half of the world. Okay.
Yeah,
So when we talk about, it's very fancy to talk about diversity, and we talk about LGBTQ and this and that and all, but there's a half of the world which is women. So please be inclusive of them. Please recognize that 50% of all educational institutions today, at whatever level, are women. Maybe not 50% in engineering, but definitely across the board. If you are not hiring women, you are hiring from a reducing pool of talent. Okay. The other thing is, for centuries, women have been more than 80-85% decision makers for everything that's bought for the family. So
absolutely.
if you really want to be consumer centric, which is what you should be if you want a long enduring business, then you must be inclusive of women. Now, how do you? So you may need to push yourself on that front, and one of the ways to do it is to mandate it. So I know of large companies in India, since I
Yeah,
sit on many boards, Bharat, who have made a huge change
right.
by specifying that every next job you will first show me women candidates. Okay,
Exactly.
that's one way to do it. The other way to do it is that the HR
Yep.
decides that every CV that is going to get circulated in the company will be gender neutral. You will not know whether it's a male or a female. And there was a research done on this, and they found that recruitment of women went up by 40%,
Yeah.
because you
So
didn't know it's a woman.
So
So
let me
they
give you
said,
another anecdote, right? So
yeah,
I won't name the company, but one of the places that I was leading, I noticed this bias towards just hiring men, right? And I actually did a Six Sigma study on it in terms of this entire recruitment process. And guess what? At every point in the decision making spectrum, you've got men. Starting from the recruiter who's pulling your resume either off the internet or wherever it is, it's a guy. And then somewhere in between, you have the HR leader who happens to be a lady. And then the question probably comes up. So, you know what I did? I'm just giving you this as an anecdote. I changed the key points of the decision process of whether a person progresses or not to the next round to be evenly staffed with men and women.
great
And
idea.
guess what happened? Our diversity, which was at about 15% when we started this process, jumped to 27%
Wow,
in just 6 months. So what I'm trying
fantastic.
to say is that, guys, and this is for all of you out there as well, question your biases because all of us have them.
Yes,
And unless you start with the assumption or the belief that yes, I do have a bias, I don't know what it is, but it is a bias. So let me try to find a way to get a non-bias, right?
Yeah,
That's really good. And this brings me to actually another to lead on to something else here.
sure.
What about women in leadership? Why is it that we don't find enough women in leadership?
So, Bharat, what happens is there is a leaking pipeline. So, if you look at, let me give you the example of large IT companies or ITES companies. Okay,
Right.
they have 10 years ago they had 50% women at the front door,
Okay.
entry level. Okay,
Right.
but and I asked the HR director this question of that ITES company. At the board level, there was zero. At the
Zero.
senior
Okay.
leadership level, there was, I think, one person. And I
Mhm.
asked her, and it's a leaking pipeline because the hotspots in a woman's life
Right.
are not managed either by society or by companies, and even by families. Uh,
Hmm.
and they suffer from the mommy tax.
Right.
Uh, so
No, I mean it's a very, I mean it's a very apt way of putting it, I think.
yeah, they suffer from a mommy tax. Now, I think that the Indian government in particular, I think
Hmm.
putting the 6 months leave is not helping the issue. If you tell me as a company that, look, if I hire someone at the age of 25, and obviously up to 35, if she wants to have children, that's the time she will want to have her children, right? She doesn't want to have them at the age of 40.
Sure.
And that's the time when they're growing in the organization. And how do you in an organization take someone out for 6 months? What do you do with their job? So you can be very magnanimous and say, okay, we'll put in another person, we'll distribute the work, etc.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
So it's hard. So I got my 3 months, and after that, I was back to work. And
Right.
the only concession I had was I could take an hour off from work either morning or end of the day. So
Okay.
end of the day never works when you are, when you
Right.
are passionate about your work. Work
You just
is
keep going. Yeah.
endless. Yeah.
That's right.
So I used to go late, and in that process, I could breastfeed the child, bathe them,
Hmm.
feed
Hmm.
them, get them ready. In a
Right.
sense,
Hmm.
before you leave them with the caregiver. The
Right.
other big thing I think which women need is they need to invest in building the help and the ecosystem around them. Because when you have a kid, the last thing you want to do is leave a very small child with an unknown maid inside a house where there's no other adult. That's the last thing you
Right.
want to do.
Right.
So, the government would do well to actually help all the support services. And they've tried. So they've told organizations that if you have 50 employees plus, you have to have a creche in the office. And now all those are enablements which never existed at my time. You know,
Right. But
I
here's
know companies. Bharat, it's amazing. I know that one of the companies I work with, TGB.
mhm.
If your child is 2 years plus, and you're a senior executive, they pay for your maid to go with you on your trip. I mean,
Wow,
that is amazing, isn't
that
it?
is pretty amazing.
I mean,
That is
that was
pretty amazing.
unheard of. Yeah.
So,
but
but
but that
Sangeeta, here's
comes with
the
its own challenge. So the companies are coming forward now. Let me tell you, if I'm going on a market visit, what's the point of me leaving my maid and my child in a hotel room?
hotel
There's
room.
no point, right? Because the
Yeah,
situation doesn't change.
right.
So what they need to do is they need to build up support around themselves so that there's someone who can keep an eye, or you're part of an institution which
Sure.
runs this as a business.
So
And
let
yeah.
me let me let me give you a little bit of a different perspective here, Sangeeta. Is that when I talk about, let's talk about, if I talk about the tech world, I know you're pretty much, you've been in the out in the industrial sort of, the manufacturing sort of world. But in the tech world, one of the things that I found is that, exactly to your point, right? The tech world gives women 6 months off, maternity leave, blah, blah, blah. And now some companies are even doing paternity leave. But those are just SOPs. Now, one of the things that I found surprisingly was that, I went out and I spoke to a couple of companies saying that, when I was working with them, I said, why don't we guys actually offer a crash? Let the women bring their children into work. It's in a central place, it's a safe place. But guess what? Liabilities. This
Right.
prevents organizations. I mean, this is ridiculous. I've heard
Right.
it in
Right.
more than one place.
Yeah.
So, if we're going to be, the point is that, this requires, in my opinion, an attitudinal and a cultural shift I agree with you about your point about, the family creating an ecosystem, or rather having a support ecosystem
Right, right.
for the woman in the house. But to create that ecosystem, I think we need to think a lot larger than that. In Scandinavian countries, for example, this is a norm.
Yeah.
Men
No,
and women,
absolutely,
you know,
absolutely. So it's a question of intent. What is your intent as a company? If you want
right?
to go beyond lip service, then these are some of the things that you need to do. And there are companies, Bharat, I know of, who do a lot of reintegration back of that person, because you're not impaired in any way. You're not impaired.
Exactly.
This is nature's process, and you are completely in top form, and you can find time in the day to catch up on what's happening at work, and you can
Right.
do it remotely now. I mean, with the COVID, I think it's taught the world that you can work remotely, and there are a lot of companies who reintegrate such an employee back into the system.
Yes. Yes.
But I don't know how many of them will not hold it against them when there's a
So
promotion around the
yeah.
corner.
So let's switch gears. With that,
Yeah.
let's segue into your growth as a leader. I mean, you're obviously competing in a man's world, so to speak, right? In all I know those organizations that you've been in, right? With the exception of Mattel, I don't know much about it, but FSL, or you look at Tata Tea. My gosh, I mean, those are male bastions, right? What was it that enabled your growth, and what were some things that hidden minefields that were out there that you had to navigate? If you could give us some color on that, that'd be really cool.
Um,
No names, no names,
no,
no
no, no,
companies,
no, no.
nothing.
Yeah.
Just we just
So, okay. So one of the things that I always depended on was the ability to hold my own, right? I had the confidence to speak up.
Yep.
I never felt shy of expressing my views. I somewhere in my corporate journey realized what my values were, and I, decided to stand by them. So once my boss, one of the bosses, and came to me and said, "Can you sign this check?" It was a blank check, and
Mhm.
I said, "Sir, I cannot sign a blank check." He said, "Yeah, but it's for a very specific purpose. It's for so and so purpose." I said, "Sir, unless you give it to me in writing, I would not be able to sign that check." And I knew that he might take it amiss, give me a wrong bad
Right.
rating, and I said, "I'm not going to do it because it's not correct for the organization to have
Absolutely.
a senior leader sign a blank check. I must know what's being done with the company." So I mean, there are some instances like that where but there are biases, Bharat, in some of the companies, and
What was the role of mentors in your
uh,
life?
so yeah, so I had mentors, and that's one of the I would say that's one of the reasons for being considered whenever there was an opportunity
Excellent.
to be promoted. And in fact, in Nestle, I switched many roles, and
Right.
the reason why I switched roles is because they depended on me as being the longest serving person who knew the company very well. So they said,
Right.
in HR, we don't want an HR professional, we want a line manager. And I had gone out there, right? I'd gone into the
Right.
market. I'd done, I used to roam around Andhra Pradesh. I've taken night trains and night buses and got off at,
Every
I got off in Guntakal once at 4 a.m. in the morning, and it was pitch dark. And there was only, thankfully, there were two figures on that platform. There was me, and there was one person coming towards me. And he turned out to be the Nestle sales officer, and I thank God
Let me
for
ask
that.
you something. This reminds me of my days as management training in Brooklyn. Did they make you walk the line with the sales guy
I
selling
did. I
chai
did.
and coffee and stuff
Oh
like that?
yeah. Oh yeah. I did that. I used to run all of Delhi city. I used to drive 100 kilometers a day. Okay. So
Did you go to
and
the rural areas?
I
Because
went to
I
the
was
rural
totally
areas.
opposite.
Oh yeah. Oh
Totally
yeah.
opposite.
Oh, but I but in Andhra I did go to rural
Okay.
areas. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So I did a lot of traveling. And once I went on a night taxi from Hyderabad to Vijayawada. And it was the scariest experience of my life because this guy, he knew he could see the truck lights coming like at him. Okay. And
Right.
he would swerve by maybe 2 inches, and then he would slam on his brakes. So the entire seat would lift up from the back and hit the front
It's like
seat.
boom, just going back and forth.
So I reached safely, thankfully, but as a result of that, I put out a note to all my direct reports in that team saying, "You are never to take a night taxi. If you have to, you first call me. Then I'll tell
Call
you
me.
whether you should
I'll tell
come
you
or
how
not."
to. I'll tell you how to handle it. Oh, that's
Yeah.
awesome. All right, let's switch gears a little bit here. Let's talk about something that everybody would be waiting to listen to is brands.
Okay, yeah,
What
sure.
makes a brand and what made, tell us the story of Maggie Noodles. What happened?
That's a very long story. So I'm
Okay,
not going to go in depth into that
sure,
story.
sure.
I think I'll mention I'll give two, three examples of different brands just to demonstrate the point. So I think brands should be considered as long-term assets. Okay, that's the view that one should take
Okay,
about a brand. Otherwise, one should not launch it at all.
okay.
So a brand is actually a long-term asset which should endure the ups and downs of business, right? And
Mhm.
finally, in whatever business you are, the consumer and the customer is the center of your business, and you have to be customer consumer centric, and let the brand build that bridge for you to be consumer and customer centric. And if you aren't centric to a B2B or a B2C, to your customer, your consumer, you won't have an enduring business. So brands help you build enduring businesses, but
Mm,
brands need to stand for something. A
right.
brand must have must articulate itself to mean something to the consumer. And if you can take it to a point where the consumer loves the brand, then you've already crossed that bridge and you have somebody who's going to be a regular consumer. Now, it's better to have not lose consumers. So the
Right.
brand's job is to deliver what it promises to the consumer 24 by 7 with no Sundays, no off days in the 365 days.
Mm,
And if you fall on your promise anywhere, and the technical guys always come and say, we have a 99.99%
right.
accuracy in the manufacturing. I said, then what happens to the 0.01% of
0.001%.
the millions of packets that you produce? What happens to those consumers? So I don't
Right.
accept that,
Right.
But
Right.
so the point is that every time you deliver to the consumer, he's experiencing your product or service, and it must be living up to the promise that you have made to them, right?
So
And
here,
it cannot mean everything to everybody. So that's the other thing. When you say a brand stands for something, it doesn't stand for something else. So very quick example here is in the Maggie case, we knew that along with the kids, the adults were eating the product at home. In India, we don't have, individual portions. We share everything on the table.
right.
And obviously, the adults would eat more than the kids. And we knew that in the research, but
Mhm.
we did not at that time want to open out the brand for adult consumption. We kept it completely focused on children because we knew that children is a growing tribe in India. India was growing still by 1.8 million births every year. Every kid who was in class one would go to two, three, four. So, there was a growing tribe
That
of
was a
kids in
growing
the country.
tribe, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you had widened it out to adults at that stage, you would have lost that very clear focus where the brand was actually befriended by the child consumer. So that's one example of how a brand needs to stand for something. Sorry, you had a question.
So in B school, right? In business school, one of the things that, is always a big part of debate is what comes first? You build the brand first that creates the demand, or is the consumer already decided what they want and then you build the brand around it? So how do you work that?
So the brand is just the name of your offering, your product or service, and it must be built from the ground up. I think brands can't, and when I say ground up, I don't mean terra firma earth. I
Mhm,
mean,
mhm.
even digitally, you can build a brand, but you have to build it up in a way that it is sustainable. So there's no point in, just spraying bullets on the horizon
Right.
in a 360-degree fashion. So it must know who it is targeting, what is that consumer need that it is wanting to fulfill, or what is it wanting to stand for
Mhm.
vis-a-vis that cohort of consumers that you want to appeal to, and that's how it should be built up. Yeah.
So why was Maggie such a huge roaring success as a brand, and it still is?
Um, I have a very simple answer to that. Read this book.
By the way, that's the book. Can you hold it up again, Sangeeta? Just hold it
Yes,
up.
sure.
Guys, this is the book written by Sangeeta.
Mhm.
called The 2 Minute Revolution. Definitely get it. It's on Amazon. I know. I looked it up. So you should order it. I am
Thank you.
making a plug for my buddy, my friend over here. So please
Thank you.
do. Really interested
So,
in
yeah, it's a long story, but I'll tell you in very briefly. Um, Anything that you can do on the brand, okay? Whether it's how you present it, what you call it, what does it fulfill, its taste, its availability. So,
that.
affordability, availability, accessibility, acceptability. Uh, the Maggie launch scored 100 out of 100 on everything. And
Mm,
it was such a power that it brought together, with
right.
everything, with a big company supporting it. So you had access to distribution. It was a runaway success. I used to
Yeah.
be chased in the street. I used to work the market with the sales guys. And they used to come after us with a danda in the van. Humko bhi stock chahiye, humko bhi stock chahiye. We really ran out of stock.
That's a
So,
great
and
situation to be in.
yeah, well, it created a lot of trouble also
Sure.
because we had to airlift raw materials, and in this whole euphoria of
Yeah.
this is a very interesting story, and I spent 2 minutes on it. In this whole euphoria of this great runaway success that India had seen,
Right.
uh, all the brains in the corporate head office said, "We'll run out of capacity at this rate. Let's order the next plant." They
Oh my
ordered the next plant, which was 2.5 times the capacity of the first plant.
my God.
And that signaled the decline of the brand. Okay. And
Oh.
that's the whole story that is in the
Oh
book and how
really?
what happened. Yeah. Because, and I'll mention it briefly, they started putting, see, when you're launching, there's a lot
Right.
of trial. The one thing we didn't know, we were launching city by city. This was 1982, centuries ago, right? You
Right.
didn't have digital. You had nothing. You had no computers. You were basically television, print, outdoor dependent. We said we'll launch in one city, big city, under our nose, Delhi Metro, and then we'll roll it out. Before we could roll it out, the wholesale had rolled it out, shipped it out right across the country. But when
Oh,
when the wholesale does that, you can never
that's
assess what it is because
what
it's a trickle in those markets, right?
yeah,
But it's all
yeah.
across the country. We could never estimate what the amount going out of
True
Delhi was.
demand was going to be.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so Delhi was, everybody was rocking, thinking they're a hero, they've done so well. So everything was based on what Delhi did. Not, that didn't come true as you rolled out because,
As
it
you
was already
extended
there.
the reach, yeah.
Yeah. So sales
Your
started
supply
coming
chain
down.
was strained.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so sales started coming down, falling below estimate. And then the managing director said, "We've just been patted on the back by corporate headquarters Switzerland saying you guys are fantastic. And now my sales curve is coming down. What the hell are you guys doing?"
It's definitely
So,
not a good problem to have there
yeah,
on that
so
side.
even before the child had learned to crawl, we were making it run a marathon.
Run.
We put
Yeah.
every
Yeah.
kind of promotion on the brand,
Right.
every
Right.
kind of promotion.
But
And
it must have been really, but it must have been really
there's an
exciting.
interesting story on that. I was the
Okay.
youngest person in the room when the MD called this meeting, and he was a foreigner and he had turned red, tomato red. Means he was livid. Okay. And nobody, all the big bosses were in the room. I was the junior most person. I was a management trainee. Okay. I was maybe product executive or whatever.
Right.
And no one opened their mouth. He kept telling us, do this, do that. I said, "Sir, the product has done extremely well. The consumers accepted it. It's just, going to take a little bit of time. The way we are
Right.
following the plan, it will work." uh, the fact that he even allowed me to open my mouth, I think speaks very well about the leadership. Okay.
That is pretty amazing. Yeah, that is pretty amazing. So that
Yeah.
brings let's jump into one other question that's a lot on everybody's mind is in today's virtual world. I know this is out of your wheelhouse, but let's try it anyways, right? In today's virtual world, what's the relevance of a brand, and is that something that that people want to that how would you go about doing that in a virtual world? Because you've got
Uh,
companies that are
the
primarily
fun,
providing services,
yeah,
right?
yeah. The fundamentals of branding are no different, Bharat, because the consumer is the same. It's only the way you're delivering your experience. You
Hmm.
in the past you had to go to a shop to see the product, to buy it, and the mediums of reaching you were very large mediums
Right.
which shot
Right.
all over the place, right? They were
Hmm.
shooting on the horizon,
Hmm.
looking for the consumer. Now it's very targeted. And it's just a different way of building the experience of a brand. But I do a program called Be Limitless for brand equity, and I do it every fortnight. And
Right.
I have already featured 9 businesses on that. They're all branded businesses. And it's
Yeah.
amazing the
I saw
way,
your last
yeah.
episode with Make My Trip. I think that was
Okay,
pretty cool.
okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that was
yeah.
pretty
So,
cool. Guys, you
so
should take a look at that program. It's called Be Limitless, and it's on brand equity. So, Sangeeta is the host of that show. You should take a look at it if you want to get some more gyan about brands, branding, marketing, and how to, drive that up. That should be something too. So
so
let
yeah.
me, sorry, go on. Please go on.
So it's today, I think the challenge is different. In the past, there was very limited data. If you
Mhm.
wanted consumer understanding, you had to do market research through these research companies who went to find
Right.
consumers to
Yeah.
talk to them. Now the consumer is sitting right in front of you on a screen most of the time.
Right.
Okay, and okay, there are many different formats. So you have social media where you can engage with them. You have e-commerce platforms where you get your data. You can
Right.
get your data,
Mhm.
but you can't get probably the connection to the consumer. But you have access to them because they're
Right.
always
Right.
coming to those platforms to shop. So in a sense, it's easier. But the difficult part is how do you bring all the data together? So you've still got sales data, you've got data coming through your website, you've got data
Right.
coming through your social media feeds, you've got data coming through your traditional media feeds,
Hmm.
and you've got data coming through your e-commerce platforms. And you need to
Right.
bring all of that data together. So today, actually, from the platform-driven data, the whole shift is going to happen to consumer-driven data. And how do
Mm.
you, as a company today, try to coalesce all this data in order to make consumer data very rich and insightful. And then you put on
So,
algorithms to understand the
yeah,
insights.
cool. One word that you used, it really stuck with me is the concept of the experience, right? Because the brand is essentially talking about the experience. I mean, it's
Yeah,
representing the experience.
absolutely.
So, industries, I think businesses in anywhere in the world should focus on so the consumer, the experience, and finally the optics around it, I guess, right? So
Yeah,
you've
yeah.
got the
And they
consumer, they're
focus
the
on one other thing, Bharat,
yeah,
the
sure.
cohort of the consumer. So what they do is they draw insights from the existing consumer cohorts, right? Because they have a lot, they're data rich. And then they use that to see if those similar cohorts exist in other data fields and then
Hmm.
get to those consumers. So it is about experience, but
It's
it's
about
also very
correlations
targeted.
also.
Yeah, it's very
Targeted
targeted
and
and very
also what are the
rich.
other correlations, right? I mean,
Yeah,
what
yeah,
else meshes with this?
yeah, yeah,
See, one of the things that always bothers me about the virtual world is that the consumers in the virtual world are very, their attention spans are so minuscule. I remember back in the day when we used to buy 30-second spots on Doordarshan, and it used to cost a bomb, right? But people would have to sit there because Chitrahar or whatever the heck it was running, and you didn't want to walk away from the TV, so you sat there and eyeballs were there. And now today, I can just with a click of my pointer or a mouse or whatever it is, I can just switch out from there and go to the next program that I want. So how do marketers get to how do you handle something like that with such high traffic, cross traffic, exiting traffic, incoming traffic, all of that stuff? What should the brand strategists be thinking of? How should they
yeah.
approach it?
So, in the past, we used to say eye popping or, very distinctive communication, etc. Now it's called thumb stopping so that you don't scroll anymore.
I'm
Yeah, you
stopping.
thumb stopping communication. And that thumb stopping communication, I think, is linked to creative and content, both. Of course, the experience. So it has to be really stand apart to capture your
To
attention
capture
and
your
to
attention.
hold it there. And do you know that a lot of the ads that you see when you're
Uh-huh.
scrolling are 6-second ads?
Yes, they are.
And yeah,
I've
they
timed them.
disappear in 6 seconds, and you get 6 seconds to deliver your full message.
Full
So
message. So there
so
better be
brands
good
have,
content.
yeah, so brands have to be very, very specific about what is it that's going to be a call out for the consumer, where that's going to keep him there and say, okay, I'm going to try this. Okay,
But
so you
I
have
think,
to be,
I
so it's
mean,
very
I think
focused.
I think the key message I just took away, because I'm trying to build a little bit of a brand, both around Saturday Night Fever as well as Grow by Design, which is my company. I think the key thing that's going to stay with me is the experience and the consumer.
Creative and content.
Sorry, and the content and the
Creative and content. Yeah,
creative and the content.
yeah.
So four things, guys. Four things. I learned something big today. Thanks, Sangeeta. I really appreciate it.
Help me do my stuff as well with these four.
Done. Done for you. Okay. I think wow, time just ran ahead. So we're 45 minutes down.
Jesus Christ.
Would
Okay.
you have some time to take a couple of questions?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
All right, great. I've got a couple here. Um, Come on, folks, get those questions out there. I haven't heard anything from you guys. All right, this is a great one from Krish. How do upcoming brands compete with established brands that have way more budgets? That's a good.
Um,
That's a good one.
Become a sniper. Don't be part of the artillery. Be a sniper.
That's a good one. So I think, Krish, the answer is really that the more targeted and the more specific you're going to get about the experience that the consumer is going to get, and bridge your creatives and your communication around it, I think is what's going to work. I mean, if I and especially for guys like you in the startups, in the startup world, or you've got a fledgling brand, I think you're going to have to constantly link back to that. You're going to
Yeah,
have to link back to that experience, link that experience back to the brand, so that you can push it back in the face of the consumer,
right.
saying, guys, you see the service? This is us. This service, this is us.
So I want to mention a couple of things.
Sure.
One is be extremely crystal clear of what is the proposition that you want to put in front of the consumer. Crystal clear. Every word of that sentence should be weighed in gold. Okay. It should mean something, otherwise it shouldn't be there. So be crystal clear on your proposition. Be a sniper, because you need to do that. You need to be a challenger all the time. Challenge everything that you can challenge, and be consistent in your communication. So the way the brand looks, its colors, everything, and what the whole aura that you're trying to create. Be consistent with it, because with the limited budget that you have, you don't want to confuse the consumer. You want them always to see something and say, okay, yeah, that's that brand or that
Awesome.
product.
Awesome. Thanks. Um, okay. Madia has asked a question here. This is interesting. I mean, it could take an entire show by itself. I'm graduating this year and want to start my own business. What would you advise a beginner?
Very open-ended question. So maybe the way you want to do it is you want to first figure out what interests you. What about doing your own business interests you? Okay, what is it that you're looking to create in your life out of doing your own business? Okay, and then what kind of business areas interest you? What kind of problem solving are you looking to do? And maybe that will open up some ideas in terms of what you could be looking at. And when you're looking at that, please recognize nobody promised you a rose garden. If anything, they promised you the thorns on the rose stick, on the rose stem. Okay.
Yep.
So doing a startup sounds very, if I may use that word on your show, sexy. Let me tell you, it's not at all. It's like Bollywood. It's like Bollywood. Bollywood is all tamasha, glamour, and show. If you ever go to a shooting, you'll see what happens behind the scenes. Okay,
Yeah.
so it's a very tough thing to do. So do it, but if you're very, very clear that you want to do it, because you will be the peon, you'll be the CEO, and you'll be everything else in between.
Yeah.
From peon to CEO, you'll be doing all the roles for your business.
So, Madhya, one of the things I will tell you is, you're really brave. Keep that courage. Courage is something, and persistence. Okay, there are two values I'll tell you, my advice, because I've tried to do some of this myself. Courage and persistence. You
Yeah,
have to say
absolutely.
it, you have to stick with it, and you have to keep making small changes, keep tweaking it until you get it right. You're not going to get it right the first time, and don't expect to. Okay, so you're in this for the long haul. It's going to be tough, it's going to be all of that stuff, but believe me, it'll also be hugely fulfilling. So we
Yeah.
need more of you, Madhya. We don't need less of you, we need more of you.
Yeah,
Okay.
but my dear, also please don't skimp on the research work that you do behind whatever idea you have. So study it in depth. Try to see what are all the adjacent areas that it touches, and try to understand that.
Great. I'm going to give you two more questions. One is a very nice one which just popped up, and this is something we were talking about yesterday. Product branding versus personal branding, right? I mean, the question is, what's more challenging? I'd like to hear your thoughts. I've got some thoughts too, but please, why don't you have at it first?
Uh, I think both are challenging. Product branding takes it out there into the bigger world. So we don't know how challenging it will be. It depends on what the competition is, whether you have a distinctively differentiated proposition in the product branding that you're planning. As far as your personal branding is concerned, it's all up to you. So you're not looking to, you're not looking for big budgets. So the whole process of personal branding lies within you. So it's much more controllable than product branding. And the principles are the same. So what do you stand for? What do you want to be known for? Are you in a position to build trust, with the
Yeah.
people who you work with? And I think that was one of my plus points.
Right.
So I used to carry a sentence which I think Gaurav challenged in one of our sessions. Deliver what you promise. And I was known as that person. If I had committed to something, I come hell or high water, unless I'm dead or I'm in a hospital, I will do it. Okay. And just Bharat today, he got a little miffed with me because we had the wrong timings. And he said, if you don't want to do it, and I thought to myself, I'm the last person who'll cancel at the last minute. Unless I'm very sick. If I'm very sick, the moment I fall sick,
Different,
I'll
different
inform the
story.
person.
Yep, yep.
But
Man, that was a
personal
zinger,
branding.
Sangeeta. Come
Yeah.
on, that was a zinger.
No, 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 no. Just to
Okay, no,
illustrate
it's
the
fine.
point.
It's
So,
fine.
I think personal branding is an important thing, and I think, like in branding, when you look at a person, we tell ourselves don't be judgmental, but what are we doing in the first 30 seconds? We are sizing that person, right?
Yeah.
So it's also about presentation, and it's entirely up to you. How do you want to be presented? You don't have to be jacketed like me. You can be as comfortable as you want, but you should be comfortable with that presentation.
Right.
And in terms of personal branding, the only thing I want to add is, when you look at yourself in the mirror, be happy with what you see, and I
That's a
think
very
then
good
you'll
one.
know that, yeah, that it's on the
That's a
right
very
track.
good one. So, Mahesh, I'd like to add a couple of things to that. I don't want to look, I would rather you didn't look at it as, product branding versus personal branding. I think in both situations, you're talking about building a brand, right? Now, the question here is, especially in the personal branding, I tell you where it starts to become challenging is, what's your audience? Just like in a product, you're looking for the consumer, you got to understand what you're branding yourself for. What do you stand for? Because now you need to dig deep within yourself to say, okay, what do I want to be known for? What do I stand for? And if you get that story straight, then build the narrative all around that. So coming back to the fact of, personal grooming, are you a person who makes and meets commitments? Do you say what you do and do what you say? how well do you interact with other people? What is their perception of you? So those are things that you need to start to look at. There's a very interesting model that I'm going to take credit for it. It's called the pie model, and I want you to think about this, right? You've got a performance axis, which is the P. You've got the image axis, dimension, which is the image, which is the I. What is the image that you project? And the third is the exposure, which is the E. Who are you projecting? Well, the exposure part is who are you projecting the P and the I to, so that you get this cohesive whole that is you and your personal brand. So it's performance, image, and exposure. So understanding those three dimensions and figuring out how you're going to address each one of those is a key way in which you're going to build your own personal brand. I mean, just a tip for you, all right?
Bharat, may I just quickly add to that?
Sure.
So, we talk about a brand proposition, and I was speaking to you about how it should be crystal clear. The way to look at it in your case, do you have an elevator pitch ready for yourself? And that would be in one sentence, your brand, your personal brand.
Yep. Super. I'm going to end with a tough one.
Okay.
And this is from Tarun. Wouldn't a mandate saying hire women mean that it's not skill based? That is, hiring based on skills, whether man or woman.
So, Tarun, what tends to happen is in large companies, they never give up on the skill. That's assumed that base level skill is there. And I think that's something that when I was HR director, my boss told me. He says he actually, one of his friends' daughters, that resume came to me, and I told him, I said, sir, she's not suitable for the job. And he was kind enough to say, okay, let it be. He wasn't the boss who said, no, you have to find a place for her. So I think large companies, and that is why it's always good to work for a large, well-heeled organization, because they've got these things very well integrated in all their systems. They don't compromise on the skill level.
So I want to add to that. Tarun, don't mistake a mandate for saying that there is an uneven playing field, right? It's not like reservations.
Yeah.
Right? So what we're saying here is that we say we want more women in the workforce. Let's say we put a number to it. I want 30% of my workforce to be women. But that does not mean at any given point in time that you're willing to drop the performance bar or the expectation bar because you're bringing in a gender diverse hire. Okay. So mandate means you want to make the numbers, sure, but you're not compromising on the quality or the capability or the competency that's required to do that job. The problem here, Tarun, is really dealing with the inherent biases our system has as a male-driven system. It is a fact. I bet you put a woman to lead your hiring, I guarantee you're going to find a better gender diverse mix than by putting a guy in charge. I'm just throwing it out there. I know I'm making a very provocative statement, but that's something to think about, right? Question your innate biases. All of us have them. How would it affect you if you had 5 women candidates and 5 male candidates for the same job? And what would be your automatic move towards? Think about that. I'm leaving that as a question. There's no answer to this. Okay. I think we're good to go right now. So, Sangeeta, thank you very much. I really appreciate you coming on my show. It was so much fun to have you, really. And I think the audience obviously enjoyed it, and they've had a lot of stuff we got out of this. I'm going to be sharing this. I'm going to save this and get the recording out to you so you can leverage it as you see fit. But this is definitely going to go up as one of the highlights of Saturday Night Fever up to this point. So thank you again.
Very much. Thank you. I love being here. Thank you.
Because I did.
I did.
All
See you,
right.
Bharat. Take care.
See you all. Thanks a lot, guys. Bye-bye.